Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I did this watercolor galaxy scene. Everything I've used, including the reference photo, will be down in the description below, so I encourage you to check that out. And let's just get right into the tutorial. So the main colors I'm going to be using for this picture are sap green, and I'm just putting little drops of water here to help mix my colors. So I'm going to use my sap green, and then I'm mixing up my Viridian hue. And I'm also doing a little bit of phthalo green. And then for my blues, I'm taking Prussian blue because I want a really nice dark blue. And then I'm also taking some turquoise for a bit of a brighter blue. And then I'm going to be mixing some indigo with some neutral tint, or Payne's Gray. I think it was indigo and Payne's Gray, because they're both on the bluer side, but I really want a nice dark blue to go on the top. Here I'm just taking my brush and I'm wetting the background down to where our foreground's going to be. So I'm not wetting the whole of the paper, just where the sky area is going to be. And I'll go in and draw the elk in afterwards, so I'm not even worrying about that. I'm just wetting over everything here, and I'm going to do the whole sky. And you want to make sure your background's pretty wet when you're doing wet and wet so that you get some really nice effects. And I'm starting with that sap green, and I'm concentrating it towards the bottom and the middle. And then that's the phthalo green or Viridian. I think that's the Viridian. No, that's the Viridian, so that was the phthalo green before. And I'm sort of just splashing these colors in. I'm being a bit quick with this, and this is sped up too because, you know, I don't want the video to be so long. But while you're doing wet and wet, when I'm first trying to get my colors down, at first, I'm doing it pretty quickly, and then once all the colors are down, you can take your time if the paper's still wet and sort of, you know, mess with the color a little bit. So those were the turquoise, and then the Prussian blue, and then the dark indigo mix. And I'm taking a little bit of the lemon yellow hue here and mixing that in with the sap green because I want it to be even a little bit brighter there. And then I'm going to start blending some sap green into our phthalo green towards the sides, and I'm going to add a little bit of hooker's green in there too, just on the two sides to darken it a little bit. And I'm just doing little dabbing motions to help blend things together. I don't want it to be a smooth transition. I want you to be able to see where I'm putting the color down. So instead of doing sweeping motions, I'm doing just little dabbing motions. And again, going in with that turquoise color. And doing those little dabbing motions so that it blends a little bit but not completely. And you'll see as I'm getting more up into the sky, I am doing a little bit more of the swiping motion to get it to blend a little bit better. And then I'll tap to kind of make little darker spots in the sky here and there. And again, that's the indigo and Payne's Gray mixture at the very top. Now, as you're doing this, you want to make sure that you start off with wet paper and wet paint. And as you're adding more paint to it, if you don't want to cause any blooms, you want to start going more into your pans and just using drier paint. So it's not going to spread as much, but you're going to get a darker effect with your paints, and you're not going to get those blooms. And I'm just blending that in there and going back in with that lemon yellow just to brighten that up a bit. Okay, so we've let that dry, and I did go ahead and sketch out the elk with a black watercolor pencil. And now I'm going to do the stars in the background. So I'm using my titanium white gouache, And I'm getting it a fairly thin consistency so that the stars will splash onto the page pretty easily. If it's too thick, it's not going to spread out nicely. And I'm just using a flat brush for this. And what I'm going to be doing is using one hand to hold it and one finger to flick down. Don't flick up because the paint's going to go in your face. But you flick down to cause those stars, and I'm going to concentrate them just in a couple of areas because stars tend to cluster in the sky if you look. And then what I'll do is get more paint, and then I'm just going to drop some bigger splatters on for some bigger stars. And then we'll let that dry again. And once that's dry, I'm going to work on the elk's breath. So the reason I didn't do it before, because the breath is in front of the stars. So if you did it with the stars, it'll look like it's fading into the background, whereas I want that in the foreground. So I just wet the page first where the breath is going to be. And now I'm using that same gouache and putting that down. And I'm going to let it blend out and spread out into the water that I've put down. And where I want it to be a little more concentrated in the middle of the breath, I'm just going to add a little bit more gouache there. And then I'm going to use a damp brush and just go around the edges and help fade that out so it looks like the breath is fading into, the air. And now we're going to work on our foreground and the elk itself. So I'm just taking my black gouache. You can use whatever black gouache you have, or you can use black watercolor pencil. And I'm just filling in this area completely, and I'm going to fill in the elk completely as well. I really love doing these silhouette paintings where you just have something simple in the foreground, and then you get to be creative with your background. So I've gone down to my size 2 brush here just to fill in the fur details of the elk and his antlers and his legs. And all I'm doing for the fur is just creating little flicky motions to come off of him. So it looks like there's little chunks of fur hanging off of him because he's not going to be completely smooth. And I'm just taking my time. So this is sped up, but in real time, I'm just taking my time, making sure I've got nice smooth lines. And again, I'm just going around here, and this is where I'm creating some of those little flicky motions to create some little furs coming off of him. And I'm just filling any little spots there that weren't completely covered. Now we'll go ahead and let that dry, and then we're going to go on with our grass. And this part here I'm going to do in real time for a little bit, just so you can see exactly what I'm doing. And literally all I'm doing is just creating little wisps of grass. So I'm, pulling one up to one side, and then I'm going to pull one up to a little bit of a different angle, and even go back the opposite way. I'm basically just pulling it up from our ground area and making it turn one way or the other. Take your time when doing grass like this. And I am still using my size 2 brush. For this, it's best if you have a brush that has a little bit of a longer point if you're having difficulty getting fine lines. So you could use a rigger brush or a liner brush. Here, this one has a little bit of a shorter point to it, but I like using this brush and I'm used to using it now, so this is the one that I use, and I find it works really good. So it's just make sure that all your grass isn't always going in the same direction, because if you look at photos of grass, it's not completely uniform. So you want to make sure you have some going in the opposite direction, some that's a little bit longer than others, some that's a little thicker than others. And I'm just going to do this throughout. And then for the little spots that looks like they have some flowers or something, all I'm doing is making a line and then doing little dots on either side of it to create that different look. And some places I'm going to cluster the grass together a little bit more. In other places it will be a little bit bare, just like you would have it in real life. And just play around and have fun with this grass. Doesn't have to be perfect. So there you see I'm just doing that dabbing motion on either side just to create some different textures. I'm looking at the reference photo, but I'm not following it completely. I'm sort of just putting things where I feel that they might go well. And again, I'm just layering that grass so it looks like there's clusters of it in certain areas, so it's a little bit thicker looking. So now to take the tape off, I'm just going slow and I'm pulling away from the picture. You don't want to pull your tape in towards your picture because if it were to rip, it will just rip right into your picture. So I always pull away. And if you find that your tape's sticking a little too much, you can always take a heat tool or something hot hair dryer and just blow it a little bit and it will loosen it up. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to subscribe, give a like, comment down below. It does help my channel out. And be sure to hit the notification bell so that you know when I post my next video next week. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.